Hi, I'm Betsy Rosenberg, and this is Green TV. And I am all verklempt because we are starting this channel with one of my favorite people. I am getting verklempt. It's partly, in large part, because of what's going on in the world right now with the climate disasters. And we're going to talk about that right away. But Michael Mann, he's been everywhere on your television screen, CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, all the alphabets, PBS, I'm sure all around the world as well. But he's not new to me. He's the first time on Green TV, and we're so proud to launch our new channel with Michael Mann. Couldn't think of anyone better, more appropriate at this moment. But you were on my show, EcoTalk, on Air America back in 2013, I believe it was, or at least the Green Front on the Green Progressive Radio Network. But whenever I see you, I say, that's my Michael Mann. I discovered him, I think, before CNN and MSNBC had him on. Maybe you were on back then, but I don't recall that. And now, since then, you've been everywhere. But I'm proud of the fact that, you know, some of us have been at this a long, long time. So you have written a lot of books. I'll list them very quickly. And by the way, if anyone doesn't know, in addition to being a climatologist, you are also a geophysicist. And you're the director of the Earth System Science Center at Pennsylvania State University. And you have written so many books. And my favorite one I have right here is The Madhouse Effect, because this has been maddening beyond. But you also wrote famously The Hockey Stick and the Climate Wars, Dispatches from the Front Lines. And now you are talking about the new climate war, and we will talk about that. But I do want to go beyond what the networks have been able to do in 2 to 4 minutes, because there's got to be a whole lot more that we can talk about that people can do. And I have some ideas. I know you do too. And I get frustrated when they, close the interview. Thank you, go to commercial. It's like, but what can we do about it? And that's what I'm hoping to be able to do with Green TV. I know we're going to do with Green TV, and that's talk about it night and day. Solutions. So without further ado, I just want to acknowledge that the suffering misery level is off the charts for so many people. It's chilling to see what these, first of all, just the pictures. It looks like an atomic bomb went off in so many places, from Louisiana to New Jersey to New York. Ida is going to go down in history, and this is a moment. And I'm just wondering how you feel. Just not Michael Mann, the scientist, not Michael Mann, the guy on television, not just, the climate expert, but boy, 2021, it hit bigger than any of us thought. Are you surprised by what we're seeing?
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. Well, first of all, it's great to be with you, my friend. You have indeed been out there on the front lines, trying to communicate the dimensions of this challenge and this threat for a number of years. And I thank you for that. And it's great to be involved in this inaugural episode of the new series.
I'm so verklempt.
So, I would say my emotions are mixed. There's the devastation that we're witnessing. How can you not be affected as a human being by the suffering that we're seeing in Louisiana, the flooding in New York, in Philadelphia, in my own state? There's a human toll, people losing their homes, some people losing their lives. A firefighter out in California has lost his life now, fighting one of these devastating wildfires out west in California, while we're dealing with these, record storms back east, and the flooding that it's caused throughout a large part of the East Coast now.
And then there's the West Coast fires.
Yeah, what's that?
The West Coast fires. I'm from California.
Yeah.
Friends have lost their homes, their ranch, their ability to go outside. As we speak, fires are still burning. Smoke is thick.
And make no mistake, this is climate change. We would not be seeing these devastating consequences, these unprecedented wildfires, these unprecedented storms. These aren't just, business as usual. We're dealing with a new level of threat, and climate change is implicated. So it's no longer about polar bears, off in the Arctic. It's about people's lives on a daily basis, where we live. And that's changed the conversation. And so, I said that I have mixed emotions. On the one hand, the suffering that we're seeing, the devastation that we're seeing, obviously takes a toll emotionally on you as a human being. But at the same time, the knowledge that we can prevent things from getting worse if we act now to decarbonize our civilization, And some of the progress we're now starting to see, the change in the conversation, the youth climate movement, the fact that the United States now, under leadership of a new administration, is leading once again, and that's bringing other countries together. There are reasons for cautious optimism that we can meet this moment, that there is a real opportunity now to address this crisis in a way that thus far we haven't. And that's what continues to sort of provide me with hope and optimism, and drives me forward. The knowledge that the more we can communicate, not just the urgency, because we can see the urgency now, but the agency, the fact that there's still time to do something about the problem, to me is what's so important today in today's conversation.
It's almost like we went as a society, not us, from problem, what problem, to, oh yeah, we're screwed, it's too late. I mean, I even have friends, not my green friends, but who say, like, they look at me like I'm naive to think we can address this. And you have been the one who has not given up, who said there's hope. And yet, is it overstating it to say that we have to transform everything, our economy, our energy system? And how the heck do we do that yesterday? Because it's here.
No question. I mean, there's a danger when it comes to sort of doomism and despair. It can be self-fulfilling. It can lead people down a path of disengagement at the very time when we need them engaged now on the front lines and demanding that their policymakers take action. So it is important to recognize what the science tells us. It would be one thing as a scientist, I have to be faithful to what the science says in my communications. And if the science was telling me that it was literally too late to do anything, then I would be forced to say so. But the science tells us otherwise. It tells us that if we can bring our carbon emissions to zero, the planet stops warming up. And that's really empowering. That means there's a direct and immediate impact of our efforts today to decarbonize our economy. And so what we need to do right now is to recognize that some of the damage is baked in. Some of the devastation is baked in. We're not going to escape dangerous climate change because it's already here, but we can prevent it from getting far worse, again, if we take dramatic action. And that's where we have to focus our efforts. We have to make sure that people don't become disengaged and disillusioned, but are out there voting for climate advocates, voting out climate deniers, putting pressure on policymakers in every way we can, participating in the larger conversation, keeping the pressure on, because this is our moment. It's a make or break moment right now when it comes to our efforts to address this crisis.
And COP26 in Glasgow, hopefully it will go through with COVID. It is a make or break COP, isn't it? Conference of Parties this time. It's not an exaggeration to say that this one must be different. It must be more than talk. The good
it's our last opportunity to avert 1.5 Celsius, 3 degree Fahrenheit warming of the planet, where we really will see some of the worst impacts.
And I guess the good news is the bad news. You cannot, nobody can be a dinosaur anymore, although I do want to get to the media piece of this problem. But it's so evident that, I mean, from the fires in Australia, and you happen to be there on sabbatical that year, to what's going on right now, to everything in between that's happened. There's no denying it. Okay, so people should have a sense of urgency. The people in the position to do something who are going to be attending from 196 some countries, the conference. But that is because things are so far advanced, and there is this concern, I'm sure you feel it, live it, that, you know, things have happened so quickly, so much faster than I always say climate science had predicted. You would agree, I'm sure, much sooner, much more ferociously, much more frequently than we had predicted, that people, not just average citizens, but people in power. It's like when the train is speeding toward the car, speeding towards the cliff, and you got to figure out what to do quickly. It almost has that feeling. And there's, you know, all kinds of talk about so many different things that are controversial. Hydrogen, we're going to have a conversation about that later this week, about geoengineering. How does one keep one's calm, the very people who can do the most good, and keep our heads straight while acknowledging we are in an emergency? And a big part of it, I think, is putting climate at the top of the list. It's always been, especially in media, you know, an afterthought in news. It can't be, you know, dessert or appetizer, nothing sweet about it. It's got to be the main meal. It's got to be something that we talk about, think about, cover constantly, put it front and center, like COVID. And by the way, look what happened when mainstream news outlets, the networks, treated it as the emergency it was.
Yeah.
Almost overnight, the world stopped. People started changing their behavior, mask, social distancing. Granted, climate's more complex, but isn't that a big part of it, is realizing that it's not business as usual. It cannot be, even compared to where it's been up till now.
Yeah, and again, there's a little bit of good news, which is that we now understand that the planet stops warming up when we stop burning carbon. So that is enabling in a sense. And it's also worth noting that the climate models actually have been pretty accurate when it comes to the warming of the planet. Scientists, using climate model predictions decades ago, successfully predicted the warming of the planet that would occur given our continued burning of fossil fuels. What is going beyond the predictions are the impacts that that's having. And we're starting to understand some of the scientific intricacies and why the ice sheets can actually collapse more quickly than we thought if you warm up the planet by a given amount. And you can see a greater amplification of extreme weather events, devastating hurricanes. So when we start to look at some of the consequences of the warming, we're finding that, yeah, these impacts are happening sooner and they're greater than we expected them to be. And that really underscores, again, the urgency. But we're also talking about the agency, acting now, making sure people are engaged. Going into COP26, there's a real opportunity for meaningful progress here. The United States has the Biden administration has committed to bringing carbon emissions down by 50% within the next decade. That gets us on the path that we need to be on to avert that very dangerous 3-degree Fahrenheit warming that we certainly don't want to go beyond. Other countries have now come to the table with similarly bold pledges. China is back at the negotiating table, which is good news. There are some stragglers. We're still trying to pull Australia along, and they're right now, of course, under the leadership of a conservative administration that seems at best half-hearted in their willingness to address the crisis. But there are some good signs here. We are making progress. We just need to accelerate that progress, and we need to keep the pressure on, because even those politicians that we might think of as our allies often will give way to the pressure that's put upon them by the fossil fuel industry and their lobbyists and their interest groups if we're not there on the other side, pushing them in the direction that we need to go.
This would be an epic, even bigger than epic, whatever the next biggest word is, challenge, if we didn't have the fossil fuel industry funded by the Koch brothers for so long fighting this, if we didn't have conservative Republicans fighting this, and they still are, right? The day and then there's the media. When Joe Biden was being inaugurated, Fox was downplaying, mocking really his climate policies. And that continues to this day. That has been, to me, the most maddening thing. Talk about maddening, that, and these people are getting paid tens of millions of dollars to deliberately deceive the American public. And it's been going on, not for 2 years, for 20 years. I've been paying attention. And how damaging has that been, and how can we stop that? And by the way, as Fox and other conservative outlets continue, and News Nation is now another one, I'm sorry to say, they had me on with a guy named Alex Epstein. I'm sure you've heard him. His title of his book says it all: The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels. And he was saying that liberals are exaggerating death. This was during the wildfires about a month ago, and then they had him on again without me, because I guess I was speaking the truth. I told him I thought he belonged on Fox. He was on the wrong network, talking about how we're exaggerating the deaths. And really, and that was 3 weeks ago. I'd love to see what he thinks now, but not really. We don't need to hear from people like that. The point is, it's continued this long. They've gotten away, I would say, with murder, because people are dying from disinformation. And there's so much outrage about what Fox and company have done in terms of lying about COVIDs and vaccines and masks. You don't hear as much about how they've been lying about climate change. And I suspect it's because people like us probably don't watch Fox, but the damage is there. And in the vacuum, the void of mainstream news networks not doing nearly enough until recently, and it's still just scratching the surface. Is it any wonder, as despicable and disturbing as it is, that we still have these obstacles? It would be hard enough without it.
Yeah, and that's what my new book, the New Climate War, is really about, the evolution in this war on climate action by polluters and conservative media outlets and politicians who do their bidding, as the impacts of climate change become too obvious for anybody to credibly deny. they have simply shifted their tactics. They haven't given up. They want to keep us addicted to fossil fuels for as long as they can. They make billions of dollars of profits every year that we remain addicted to fossil fuels. And so what they've done is they've shifted their tactics. And when I say they, I mean fossil fuel companies, I mean the front groups that they fund, I mean the talking heads who do their bidding, the politicians who do their bidding, and the right-wing media outlets, Rupert Murdoch's media empire, News Corp being foremost among them. And so what they've done is they've tried to now shift on from outright denial to sort of softer forms of denial. Oh, well, maybe it's real, but the impact isn't that great. Or a division, get climate advocates fighting with each other about their own carbon footprints, for example, so that they don't represent a united front demanding action. Divide the community of climate advocates through trolls and bots on social media, through divisive campaigns, shifting attention, and this is deflection now. So we've got denial, but we've got delaying action as long as they can. We've got deflection, deflecting attention away from the needed systemic solutions.
Right. And
Carbon
downplaying and diminishing all those D words.
Yeah. Exactly. Subsidies for renewable energy, carbon pricing, blocking new fossil fuel infrastructure, all these things that we can only do at a systemic level. Only our policymakers can implement these policies. We can't do them as individuals. And there's a reason that British Petroleum gave us the very first individual carbon footprint calculator in the early 2000s, because they wanted us so focused on our own individual carbon footprint that we failed to take note of theirs. 70% of carbon pollution comes from just 100 polluters. And so these D words, as you mentioned, there's division, there's delay, there's deflection, and even doom mongering, despair mongering. Again, as we talked about earlier, if they can lead you to believe it's too late to do anything, it potentially leads you down this path of disengagement, the same path of disengagement that outright denial leads you toward. And so we have to represent, these are the tactics they're using. We need to fight back against those tactics, because these are the only obstacles that truly remain in our way now.
There are a couple of reports that came out just in the last 24 hours. One that Murdoch in Australia is now suggesting that his newspapers, mostly, I don't think they have a Fox equivalent there. They're just destroying our country, not theirs, with these lies, to downplay, to kind of soft pedal climate change resistance. Too little, too late, I would say. And this is so damn predictable, by the time, and they're still not even stopping on Fox and News Nation right now. How maddening is that? Like, it's almost predictable that, but just wait till it's too late, and then let's cover our ass. And so they don't have morals, they don't have scruples, the oil industry and the right-wing media outlets. They don't have children, they don't have grandchildren. They do, of course. How is it possible to look themselves in the mirror? You think, really, especially we've been talking about this for years, but at this late date, I mean, it's not only murder, it's theft, it's stealing our kids' and grandkids' future, and it's got to be stopped.
Well, it's sociopathic, behavior, and that's the way we have to look at it. You cannot rationally defend it. You cannot imagine it yourself, because these people don't necessarily view the world the way we do. They don't have the same empathy that we do. And so when you lack empathy, it leads you towards the sort of behavior that we see from Rupert Murdoch and News Corp. And you're right, this latest campaign is just such an abject example of greenwash. I'm actually quoted in the New York Times today about this new campaign on their part, because what they're trying to do is to distract from the fact that they have been the primary purveyor of climate change denial and disinformation now for decades.
Distract.
And what they're saying is, oh, well, we're committed to, decarbonizing our economy by 2050. It kicks the can so far down the road, decades from now. So we're not really necessarily going to be even here to ask whether or not they made through on those commitments. And in the meantime, it's a crutch. It's a way of saying, oh, look, we'll deploy carbon capture and new technology decades from now, so we can continue to burn fossil fuels now because we'll just fix the problem down the road. Call me cynical, but that is the sort of gambit that we're seeing from News Corp as a means of distracting from the fact that they have been perhaps the primary climate villain. And as I say in this article, until they call off their attack dogs on Fox News and on the Wall Street Journal editorial pages, until they stop their assault on climate action, we should remain extremely skeptical, and we should continue to view them as the climate villains that they are.
And I think Fox and company should be sued. I know there's a First Amendment, very much aware of that, but you know what? You're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater or some venue like that. Why are they allowed to say there's no fire when the planet is burning? And
well, they're creating fires on a crowded planet is what they're now doing.
And they're making it, they're inflaming it. They're throwing gasoline on it and getting away with murder. And with President Biden trying valiantly to pass legislation, the infrastructure bill, all that, and still seeing resistance from Republicans, like, pay attention, turn on the news. My God, how can they look their kids in the face, And that's what's so maddening, that even in our country, so-called leaders are holding back critically needed, already late in the game progress.
No, that's right. We have to recognize that there will continue to be bad actors. That's not going to stop. We need to make progress. We need to move forward in spite of that. And, you don't need 100% of the public to be on board for a social movement to make, social progress. What you need is an activated majority. And we've seen that with other social movements. There's reason to believe that we have that critical mass when it comes to climate action now. And so let's not be distracted to some extent by that fringe that will continue to remain, that we will never convince with evidence and reasoning, because they see this entirely through an ideological lens. They're never going to come on board, and we could waste a lot of time and effort trying to bring them on board when our real focus needs to be on what I call the confused middle. People in the middle who are genuinely confused. They probably no longer buy into the denial that's been promoted by inactivists, but they at least aren't convinced that we can really do anything about it. And they need to understand that we can. We need to take that sort of confused, inactivated middle and move them into the category of the engaged, get them on the front lines. And that's what it's all about right now. Ignore the deniers, refute their misinformation, because it can infect our larger public discourse. So we have to, recognize when they put forward bad faith arguments, we have to call them out, because we don't want, people in the middle to become, to find themselves subject to their disinformation efforts. But let's keep the focus on those people that are movable and move them into the category of the engaged.
And wouldn't it be a good use of mainstream network news outlets right about now, if we truly are living in an existential crisis, and clearly we are the biggest, no doubt, for humanity? Why is there no programming? At least once a week. Doesn't Mother Nature deserve, a primetime show? And I've been pitching them, trying to transition to radio to TV. I was on Air America when Rachel Maddow was. One of us went on to TV fame. But it's not about me. I'm eco-minded, because what I do is interview the experts, and I think the public should be hearing these conversations, and they're not anywhere. That's why we started Green TV. We're hoping to be live streaming, and hopefully in not too distant a future, because there's no shortage of problems, solutions, and solutionaries to interview, be 24/7. So instead of a CNN, you'll have the equivalent of a GNN, Green News Network. And we're so proud and pleased that you could be with us. I know you have to go, so let me just mention this last study, which just made the connection between extreme weather events, no surprise, climate change, and health impacts, like personal health equals planetary health. There's no good anything, jobs, economy, life on a bad planet, and the planet is dying. Let's just say it. So it's so urgent. There's so much to do that I think media is the only way I know to convey this information that is so critical. And why should we not be tapping into the, wisdom of experts like you, but for more than 3 minutes, every now and then on TV. So wish us luck, because our luck will be your luck, will be everyone's luck. That's all we're trying to do, is connect those dots and show people this affects you, and it's coming for everybody, and nobody is safe wherever you live. And I didn't get to about half my questions, and
we'll do it again sometime in the future. Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll go forth and educate, inform, inspire, and greenify. And we'll see you again soon. And so proud that you're doing this and that we're seeing you everywhere.
You too, my friend. Thanks so much. I look forward to talking again soon.
Terrific. Thanks.